Hi, Jack.
Shelley. Nice
Welcome. It's good to see you. Welcome to my channel. You all don't know, this is Jack at Spread Book Joy, and she is fantastic. And today we are going to be talking about the best and Jack's best and worst reads of 2022.
Yeah.
So
and it's really unusual for me to have a best and a worst read. So I thought it'd be good to talk about, because I did a video where I talked about best and what best means, and I always find it really difficult to pick favourites or best when people say, what's your favourite of anything? Unless I have a very clear idea. Like, I'm very clear that David Bowie is my favourite singer. I'm very clear that this is my favourite, I don't know, drink or whatever. But when it comes to books, and people say, what's your favourite? And I'm like, oh, I can't, always often say it, especially when I'm reviewing the year. So, but when I talked all my way through why I couldn't talk about what was the best, I found one book and I thought, no, actually, that was the best book I read. Because I think it comes down to the fact that this book was, I think I rarely read a book nowadays. But when I was younger, I read a ton of books, and I've read a load of books that I absolutely adored and I love to this day. And I very rarely these days read something and go, oh my God, that's amazing. That's one of the best things I've ever read. Rarely happens these days. I read a lot and I enjoy a lot of what I read, and I love a lot of what I read, but I rarely sit there and go, when I finished it, just wow, So when I thought about it, I thought, no, well, clearly this book is the best book I read last year, because I'm saying it's one of the best books I've ever read. So that book is Lonesome Dove. Yeah,
okay.
Lonesome Dove. Yeah. So Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. And I had been told by a really, really good friend of mine years ago to read it, and I didn't, because I was like, oh yeah, I'll read that one day. Then she's like, oh, if you read Lonesome Dove? I was like, never heard of it.
I get it.
Yeah, never heard of it. And then I go on to BookTube, and it's like
everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, last year lots of people were reading it, and I thought, I really need to read Lonesome Dove. And then I think I'd bought a copy, and Sandy over at Miss Reads a Lot, she put out that she was going to be reading it for her 1001 book challenge. And I said, oh, let's buddy read it. So we finally did. We buddy read it in the summer, and it was in September, October. And yeah, both of us were just absolutely gripped by this book. Yeah, I think initially I wasn't. So the premise, if people aren't aware of it, it's a Western, and it's set in Texas, and it's after the Civil War. And we start off at this ranch. It's a cattle ranch, and it's called the Hat Creek Outfit. They're called the people who run it. And they're two older protagonists who run this outfit, and they have this cattle ranch. But they had been, prior to this, they had been Texas Rangers.
Oh.
So, yeah, and you kind of find they have this history. So there's a huge cast of characters, and it's epic. The book is quite epic in scope. And what I loved about it, so initially when we were reading it, there were 3 parts to the book, and the first part was good. I was like, this is good. I'm enjoying it. The style's good. I'm enjoying it. The characters are fantastic. Like, you're learning about the characters, but it was quite slow paced, and I like pace. I like a lot of things to happen.
Yeah.
And then from part 2, things start to happen, and then you're just completely hooked in. But what I think was genius about it was that the initial slow setup gave you a real depth of understanding about these characters, to the point where you cared about them so much by the time stuff starts to happen, that by the time things start to happen, you're really invested, really invested in these characters. So he swept us along, and yeah, it was some horrific things happen to these characters, because it's the Wild West, it's frontier life. So they decide to they drive their cattle up to Montana from Texas. And so you go on this epic journey with them. Wow. And there are some side stories happening and things. So you get this kind of, I think Sandy and I both agreed that I think I had such a sense of time and place from this book, from the writing.
Oh,
Yeah, I like the landscape in America. I was, you just like, everyone talk about frontier. You know, you read these, watch westerns, or you watch things about frontier life, and you might watch a great western on the TV, and you see like, or in the cinema, and you see this amazing landscape, right? So America's just a stunning landscape, but what the story is usually about the lawlessness or the whatever, and there's a lot of that in Lonesome Dove. But the actual impact of the environment on these characters and these people who are, you know, they're frontiers people, so they're just they're trying to make a life in the most inhospitable landscapes, and these,
right. It's like
yeah,
one of the enemies is the elements, right? Because they could really harm your characters who you are invested in.
Yeah,
So
and also Sandy was saying, I didn't realize, like, reading these horrific things that are happening to them as a result of the nature, like the flora, the fauna, the whole landscape, the weather,
right.
and the things that they encounter. And in amongst all of that, there's the lawlessness and the villains and the characters and the danger that comes from that. And then he also talks about you know, the indigenous people there, and the things that have gone on between the settlers and the indigenous tribes. And it's just this whole sort of picture and snapshot of life at that time from the perspective of settlers. You know, it's not from the perspective of the indigenous people there, but
Sure.
This is what it is. It's from their perspective as cattle ranchers in Texas, and it's at this stage, really interesting stage, it's post-Civil War. So there's kind of, you're getting a feel of that part of American history as well. So yeah, it was fantastic. So yeah, we loved it. And it was, but for me as well, I don't like reading. I mean, I will read shocking things, but quite often I'll steer clear of things that are, if I'm not in the mood to reading about anything like too violent or anything like that. And there is a lot in Lonesome Dove that happens that's, you know, quite unpleasant and violent, whatever, but so gripped by the story and the characters and by the writing that I just, yeah. It was
it's like all is forgiven because it's done so well, you know.
Yeah,
like things that you think you don't like, all of a sudden you're like coming around to because the book is so good.
Exactly. And it's sort of the I read the second book in the series with Sandy at the start of this year, and actually I can see why Lonesome Dove's out of the whole series, and I will read the entire series because I just want to know about these characters and things, but whilst it was a good book, it wasn't a great book, and it's not like in the same that you can't like. I think Lonesome Dove was very special because I got a real sense of their journey and the landscape and the harsh realities of frontier life, and not just the impact of people. Whereas the second book focused more on, you know, sort of the lawlessness and some things that were going on, and that was more of a focus. Whereas I just felt the first book had just epic. You can see why it's Pulitzer Prize winning novel. So I can see why, you know. And actually the audiobook was fantastic as well. So I have to say the audiobook was really good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, really
that's great
good
to know.
So in comparison, then my worst book was clearly like, that was a real clear choice for me. I didn't even have to think about that because I read as part of Garb August, and I really liked Garb August. I did a kind of blog on it where I talked about that. I love the fact that it's bringing attention to these, to, you know, people reading what they want to read, even if other people might consider it trash. You know, one person's trash is another person's treasure kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I love that whole thing, the sort of promoting just reading what you want to read kind of idea of Garb August. Yeah. And I decided, well, I didn't decide. I think, I can't remember who put the suggestion out there, but there was sort of, you know, people talking about reading, you know, real trash classics. And one of them was, like, Flowers in the Attic by Virginia Andrews, or V.C. Andrews. So she's known as V.C. Andrews in America, or Virginia Andrews in America. I can't remember what it is, but she's known differently over here. And Flowers in the Attic, I've heard of, and I didn't know what it was about, which is strange because, you know, I am a child of the 80s when I think these things were doing the rounds as well. Obviously, I didn't read anything of it, but yeah, so I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll read that. That's fine. Didn't realize what the premise of it was, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to spoil it for anybody. I don't want to do any spoilers.
Well,
no, I won't do any spoilers, but
I don't
know if anyone's going to read it.
I haven't read Flowers in the Attic, so I can talk about it from the perspective of someone who hasn't read it. So I don't think I could spoil it, but I know that it's listed here, like on if you look on Wikipedia or something, that it's listed as a Southern Gothic classic.
Really?
And yes, and so this is why my husband wanted to read it, but then I had heard so many horrendous reviews of the book that and from what I know, it is like siblings living their childhood in an attic.
Yeah.
But it's VC Andrews is supposed to have this sort of Gothic nature to her writing. And so after he was like, "Do you think I should read this?" And I was like, "No, I think it'll put you off to reading."
Well, I tell you, the thing is, like, I'm not going to sort of go into the kind of core surprises of the book.
Sure.
It's very taboo. Like the things that are explored in it are very taboo. So these children, but the basic premise is these children are locked away in their grandmother's attic in this huge house, and kept a secret. Now, I suppose I'm not going to. It's not going to be a spoiler, I suppose, but basically, he starts off with them and their mum and dad, and a very loving family, mum and dad and these children, and then the father dies. Now that happens in the very first chapter, so I don't think that's like a big spoiler.
No.
So and then the mother takes them back to her parents, and seeing all this from the children's perspective, and they don't know what's going on. It's from one child is narrating it as well. One child in particular is narrating it. So there are two there's a girl and a boy, and then there are a twin girl and a boy, girl and boy about 5 years old, and the boy and the girl, the older two, are about 10 and 12, I think.
Okay.
And then they turn up at their grandparents. They've never met their grandparents. They didn't know their mum they didn't know about their extended family at all, and then they're put up in this attic, and then they're just locked up there, and they don't know why. They don't know anything that's going on, and then their mother explains why, and it was so convoluted, the reason that the mum gives. The whole thing was just I really, really dislike. I read fantasy. Fantasy is one of my favourite genres, but I really dislike it when things aren't believable.
Oh no, I know what you mean. It's like, yeah. It's like, I mean, because you have to, with fantasy, they're building a world in which you kind of, you're there, and they're doing that work for you, and it makes sense in the world. But when you have to suspend your disbelief, you're like,
yeah. And this was so, like, I suppose, where do I start with what was wrong with it for me? And I know a lot of people love it, so obviously this is my opinion about what was wrong with it for me. And I just felt that first of all, we'll talk about the narrator, and the narrator was the girl, and she's narrating the story, and I just didn't like her. I didn't think she was a good character. I didn't think she was a particularly well-written character for me. I just felt she just didn't feel believable as a character. The children and their behaviour, and my background is as a teacher, so I come into contact with lots and lots of children, and the children's behaviour was I just didn't find it believable. I didn't find any of that like in chiming with like, oh no, yeah, that's how a child would behave. And I know all children are different, but it just didn't feel real. It was like as if Virginia Andrews had never met a child at that age. It just what it felt like. It just felt like, have you actually met you? But yeah, it was really strange. And then the convoluted plot as to why they were in the attic was ridiculous. And then it's supposed to be, their grandmother is this horrible figure, and the children, what they were doing in the attic, like the first half of the book, it was so dull. It was so boring. I thought I would be many things reading Flowers in the Attic. I thought I might be this, a bit of disgusting. I thought I might be a bit off, because there's a lot of really strange things that happen in it. I was bored more than anything, and that is the one emotion I wasn't expecting to feel from it, was boredom, because of the writing style. For me, didn't think it was particularly good, whatever good may be, but for me it wasn't. The characters weren't believable or likable, and then it was boring because what these children were doing was just so dull. And that by the end of it, I was almost, you know, willing bad things to happen because I wanted something to happen, which is awful. But and I normally would never have continued, but because I DNF, and this is why when you were sort of talking about superlatives, and I thought, oh no, you know, I can't really talk about best and worst books. So I don't know. I was like, oh no, I do have a worst book because I actually finished Flowers in the Attic because it was a buddy read, and other than that, I would have DNF'd it because not because of because I don't mind a shocking book, and Lonesome Dove. In Lonesome Dove, some things happen that are absolutely horrific that happen in that book. However, you know, I could get, you know, I could read this book and enjoy this book, whereas with it's not that it was the shocking things that make this book a bad book for me. It's that I don't think it was particularly a good book. I don't think it was well written. I don't think the writing style. I don't think, you know, for me, boring. I think, and so here it was a Southern Gothic classic. I don't know, you know, and I think, I mean, wait, I don't really necessarily know much about Southern Gothic. So what would you define, like, what would be the key characteristics for you as Southern Gothic?
So, you know, it's grotesque.
Right.
That maybe there's like grotesque characters. It's obviously set in the South. There is no there's no real, like, there, you know, maybe it's like Scooby-Doo is Southern Gothic in that it's like we think that there's a, you know, a ghoul or a ghost or something, and then you can rip off the mask and it's really just a person.
Right.
So there's that aspect to it. The writing has those Gothic elements in that it's like the setting, it can be sort of spooky or have that sort of you know, decrepit. There's like a decrepitness sometimes in the setting. So yeah, so those are some elements to Southern Gothic.
Which sounds great.
Right. Right. But then I'm like, you know, I don't, and then they often discuss class issues and in the Southern US, you know, class issues, race issues. So they'll talk, it has some of those themes running throughout it. But I mean, I don't know. I've never read V.C. Andrews, so I don't know.
I wouldn't, because I didn't even realize, I mean, I don't even think, well, I wouldn't have guessed it was set in the south of America. I suppose, I don't know. My American geography is not the best, obviously.
No.
I'm not American. But and I don't know if it's, I can't even remember where it was set, because it's set within this house, which is actually supposed to be quite, you know, remote. And it's a big, and it is a big Gothic house. Actually, the house is quite what I would think of as Gothic.
Right.
But, and there is, you know, there's ridiculous character, and actually at the end it is kind of revealed, there is kind of not a shock ending. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who might want to read it, because there are plenty of people who do, but by the end of it, yes, you're right, that kind of the person who is the monster at the end is a reveal kind of thing, you know, it's a reveal.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah, it's like, and it's not what you think, I suppose. So there is kind of a bit of a twist to it.
Sure.
But yeah, to compare those two books, like, it's just, yeah, they were, but very clearly for the first time, I suppose, since being on BookTube and doing a sort of annual review, I can quite clearly go, yeah, that was my worst book.
Yeah. I noticed that for me, like with worst books, if it's short, I'll just finish. You know, I'll just finish it. Or if it's a buddy read, you know, then it's like I'm motivated to finish, because at least I'm lamenting with somebody that I don't like it. You know?
Well, that was part of the, you know, we kept sort of both of us sort of ranting to each other about the book. So it was almost enjoyable in that sense.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of pick it apart with someone.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have suspected that the book would be boring though. So that's good to know.
Yeah, for me, I felt it was. I mean, I think with I did say at one point though, to be fair to the book and that sort of scandalous, trashy novel, if I'd read it as a teenager, I probably would have devoured it. And I think I probably would have read it as an adult with nostalgia and with some sort of fond nostalgia. It's the type of book that you would have passed around in like high school, you know, because it's so shocking, you know, because you're a kid and that to you it's shocking. You're like, well, the things that happen. Yeah, and as a teenager, you would have been like, wow, this is shocking. As an adult, I'm like, that doesn't make up for the bad writing and the boring parts for me.
Right.
You know? So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, because you're tolerant. I mean, I get it, because there was just stuff that I consumed when I was younger that I was just like, why? Like, why did you like that?
But even so, you can also, why did you like it? But you can also still, to this day, you can look at it and go, almost with nostalgia, and think,
you kind of you give it a pass, you know.
You remember the impact it had on you then, and you still kind of, like, those emotions still kind of come about, but you recognize it's not good. Like, objectively, I suppose, not good, but you can kind of have this nostalgia about it, whereas because I came to it as an adult and as a sort of more objective reader, and also as someone who's got more life experience and more reading experience, it just wasn't, you know. It was not good. And there's a whole series of this. Just like it's an entire series, and there are several films, and it's hugely wildly popular. So, you know, you can't, if anyone out there is interested in reading it, you cannot take my dislike of it. Read it for yourself, I think, and figure it out. But very, very odd thing, odd success. I think it's probably one of those word of mouth successes, possibly for me. You know, have you read it?
So come here for a secret. We're gonna talk about this book.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I do have Lonesome Dove, so I know that's one that I want to read eventually. But I know I do think about, because I don't think anybody walked away from those who read it in Garb August, because that was kind of a big hot book for Garb August. As far as I could tell, most people walked away from it with the feeling of like, it just wasn't great.
No. This is it. So I think I'm definitely going to do some Garb August. It's not put me off Garb August, which is
no,
right. But it's I think I need to just switch up my strategy for Garb August this year.
I know. Same. I have to do, because I read fan fiction for Garb August, and so I need to. I don't want to do that again for Garb August in 2022 because I think it's probably going to happen. But I'm going to switch. I'll probably switch what I read.
Switch up strategies. So I was thinking maybe to sort of do some trashy romance, not like Bonkbusters, because not for me. But I remember when I was a teenager, I read a few Danielle Steele's and things like that. So possibly, you know, because they had a bit more of a romance element and they weren't just about the rudeness. But I was thinking maybe possibly that, or TV tie-in books.
Nice.
Yeah, so I was thinking of TV, because I went through a huge, you know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as we've talked about, I think you and I mentioned it before. And I loved books when I was like in my late teens, early 20s. I was like, so I got loads, because I love the series so much. I just had tons of books. I've since given them away many years ago, but I feel like, I wouldn't mind reading some. I've read the Buffy graphic novels, but I think there's an art to those, whereas the TV tie-in novel is something.
It's hard to say. It's hard to, you know.
I think it kind of fits the Garb August remit for me.
I absolutely agree. I know. I think my strategy is going to be. I was watching a romantic comedy, like a contemporary romantic comedy movie last night, and I was thinking, I try romances, but they're always like historical romances, which I feel like I get along with but I can read one every 6 months and I'm fine, you know, like I'm good. But I was thinking, I wonder if I would actually like contemporary romances more, because I do enjoy a good romantic comedy.
Yeah.
So I wonder if I'll like it actually.
Oh, this is it. So I was thinking, yeah, I think contemporary romance for me, and again, I don't mind a contemporary romance every now and again, but it depends, because when I think about, for me, I don't say, I think people object to the word trashy. I'm reclaiming the word trashy, because I think it's like, you know, that's the whole point of Garb August, is these books are not trash. They're books.
Right.
They're just books that some people have judged to be that, but they're not.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think when I think of like trashy romance, I think of like, I suppose, I don't know if it is trashy though. People love her, but Colleen Hoover, because you had an experience with Colleen Hoover.
Oh, gracious, yeah, yeah. I think that at one point romances, it was all about the sharp banter and the flirtation. And then once they get together, it was behind closed doors, you know? Yeah. And then they would kind of emerge as like a couple. Yeah. And I think with more, as we've gotten into this more contemporary age, it's just like we just write the whole scene, the whole romance, you know, romance.
You just, do you feel, and just, I whenever I read anything like that, I'm kind of, unless, I mean, it's very rarely do I think it's done particularly well.
Right.
And if I've ever read it, I read Verity, and I was just like,
yes, it was just strange.
I mean, expecting that. I was expecting this like psychological thriller.
Right. And then there was like these really
scenes.
Yes, yeah. And so I was just, so I thought as like a topic, you know, when Garb August comes around again, I will possibly I'll do like a, maybe I'll talk about it, talk about like the way that all the doors are open now, it seems like.
Yeah.
And that these scenes are really, and it seems okay. But anyways, and not that I don't think it's okay, but I just haven't really thought too much about it, or if even I enjoy reading that, because I didn't like it in Verity, but I didn't think it was done well. So I don't know.
This is the thing, because it depends on the book, doesn't it? Because actually, when you're reading a book, and like I read all the Charlene Harris Sookie Stackhouse books this year, and they're steamy. Okay. Now, I'm not someone who would say I like a steamy novel. I generally will steer clear. But I like those books, and I like the characters so much, and I really enjoy that world. So when it's thrown in there, it doesn't feel that it's not part of it. Feels it's done well, because it's done quite naturally, and also it's quite funny. Right, yeah. Because some of the lines did make me laugh out loud. But when it came to Colleen Hoover, I didn't realise she'd previously been a romance author, and that Verity was a departure from what she normally does. So when those steamy scenes were there, I was like, what?
Same. Same. I was like shocked down to my core. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. But exactly. Well, I actually should get running, but I wanted to, thank you. Thank you for being on my channel and for chatting with me.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to chat to you.
All right. I'm going to wave goodbye, and I'll stop this. Bye.